The old house stood at the edge of town, where the roads turned to dirt and the trees thickened into a dense, suffocating forest. Sarah had inherited the house from an aunt she barely remembered, an inheritance no one in her family seemed to want. Still, the idea of escaping city life appealed to her. The air was crisp and quiet, free from the suffocating hum of the metropolis she had left behind. On her first night there, Sarah noticed something odd. As she walked through the living room, her footsteps echoed differently in one spot. She stepped back and forth, feeling a subtle hollow beneath the hardwood floor. It was barely noticeable, but the way the sound shifted sent an uncomfortable chill up her spine. Shrugging it off as an odd quirk of the old house, Sarah carried on with her unpacking. But later that night, just as she was drifting off to sleep, she heard it, an unsettling creak from below. She froze in bed, straining to listen. The sound came again, louder this time, a groaning noise that seemed to rise from deep beneath the floorboards. Sarah's pulse quickened. She got up, her feet sinking into the cool floorboards as she cautiously made her way to the hallway. The noise had stopped, leaving only the sound of her own breathing echoing in the silence. She stood there for what felt like hours, listening to the oppressive quiet, before convincing herself it was just the house settling. The next day, she explored the house more carefully. There was no basement, no cellar, nothing that could explain the noises from below. But that hollow spot in the living room kept drawing her attention. It felt wrong, out of place, like something was just beneath her feet, waiting. That night the creaking returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't just the house groaning under the weight of age. It was rhythmic, slow, deliberate. It sounded as if someone or something was moving beneath the floor, pacing in the darkness below. Sarah's heart raced. She flicked on the lights and rushed to the living room. The hollow spot was there, unchanged, but now it felt like it was watching her. Every creak seemed to follow her movements, growing louder as she stood frozen in place. A sudden loud thud echoed up from the floor beneath her feet, so hard it rattled the windows. In a panic, Sarah grabbed a flashlight and began searching the house again, more frantic this time. There had to be something she was missing, some crawl space, a hatch, something. She checked every corner, every inch of the walls, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary, until she found it. Hidden beneath an old rug in the far corner of the living room was a small wooden trapdoor. The wood was old, warped, and covered in dust, as though it hadn't been touched in years. Her hands trembled as she reached down, gripping the rusted iron ring embedded in the wood. With a grunt, she pulled it open, revealing a narrow, pitch-black hole descending into the earth below. A foul, musty smell wafted up from the darkness. Sarah shone her flashlight down into the abyss. The beam of light barely cut through the shadows, but she could see a set of narrow, rickety stairs leading down. Her stomach twisted into knots. Suddenly, a noise from below, like the scrape of something heavy being dragged across the dirt, made her blood run cold. She swallowed hard, the light in her hand shaking uncontrollably, casting flickering shadows across the walls. For a long moment she considered closing the door and walking away, but something, curiosity, fear, or some twisted sense of obligation, compelled her to descend. She stepped cautiously down the creaking stairs, each step slower than the last. The air grew colder, thicker, the deeper she went, and the smell became unbearable. It felt as though the shadows themselves were closing in around her. At the bottom, her flashlight flickered, struggling against the suffocating darkness. The beam landed on something strange, marks etched into the dirt floor, jagged and deep, like claw marks. And then, in the far corner of the small, damp space, she saw it, a figure huddled against the wall. It was barely human-shaped, wrapped in what looked like tattered fabric, its back turned toward her. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run, to scream, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. Her flashlight flickered again, and for a brief second the figure twitched. The silence was deafening. Slowly, agonizingly, the figure began to turn. It moved unnaturally, its joints creaking as though they hadn't been used in years. When it finally faced her, Sarah saw its face, or what was left of it. The skin was stretched tight over bone, its hollow eye sockets staring straight through her. A gaping mouth opened slowly, emitting a low guttural hiss. Her scream caught in her throat as the flashlight sputtered and went out completely, plunging the room into total darkness. In the pitch black, she heard it move again, dragging itself across the floor toward her, the scraping sound echoing off the walls. She scrambled backward, her hands clawing at the cold, damp dirt beneath her, trying to find the stairs. A sharp pain shot through her ankle as something cold and bony wrapped around it. Sarah kicked frantically, but the grip tightened. She could feel it pulling her back toward the shadows, toward the thing that had been waiting beneath the floor. And then, in one final desperate attempt, she yanked her leg free and stumbled up the stairs, slamming the trapdoor shut behind her. For hours, Sarah sat against the door, her heart pounding, listening. The creaking, the scraping, the shadows moving beneath the floor. It had all gone silent, but she knew. Whatever it was, whatever had been down there wasn't gone. It was just waiting,